Hanji, welcome to another episode of the Not in the Clouds podcast. I sound confused again because it's been a while since we've recorded.
Yeah, it's been a good week. We've been blessed with some good weather, meaning sun with random rain.
That's such a British thing to do, by the way. I know we've got a few viewers in other countries, but it's such a British thing to talk about the weather first before anything. It's like
Over this past week, obviously close to our heart, and Sarpaj, you can say some of your memories, but unfortunately Mata Gyan Kaur passed away, so that's what we was busy with last week. Somebody I've seen from when I was young, always in a lot of ras and bhakti when doing kirtan, and it's just somebody you could see in their eyes, that spark. Somebody that they didn't speak a lot, but when you sat with them, you felt that peace.
Over the weekend, we had a few examples of stories from their family and telling us about their time they lived through three Satgurujis. She used to sing in Kirtan, she used to be on the Vajja singing, she used to play Tolki. And whenever she would be singing, she would sing in Uche Sura, she'd be really Josh med, like go bright red. And it was a sight that we're not going to get it again. We're not going to get to see that again, and it's a big shame, big loss. Another thing that happened this week is the three of us had the chance to go to the Maharaja Ranjit Singh, the Wallace collection. Yeah, it was the Wallace collection. And whilst we were there, we met the curator, Davinder Toor. And it was really nice spending time with him. His collection and how he's grown and his story and his journey is phenomenal.
His personality really came across during our conversations. He was so grounded. To be maybe he doesn't consider himself to be a position of like stature in society, especially in Sikh society. I don't know, high society, but he definitely came across as somebody who's humble but very, very learned. Somebody who has a real wealth of experience and knowledge about the things that he's collecting, and it was just really interesting to hear how he's grown in this industry. I think it's incredible what he's doing, and it was an absolute honor to have him spend some time explaining his collection and his story, and the way he curated that collection in the Wallace collection, how he curated that gallery in the Wallace collection, and the way that it was enriched with sound and sangeet, and how every chamber had a theme. If you weren't looking for those kind of hints or subtleties, you could quite easily miss them. But that level of attention, I think we asked him the question as well. Are you sort of a one-man army, or is there a team behind it? And it was almost, too many chefs spoil the broth sort of thing. But so he's done an incredible job.
I don't know if you noticed this. This is something that dawned on me afterwards. But when you look at the size of all of the other rooms, I don't know if this was purposeful. That the size of the rooms when it was talking about the Sikh Empire and the time of Maharaja Ranjit Singh Ji, you had a lot more space, like a lot more breathing space. But when you got to that part where, for example, it had the quote-unquote true note of the receipt of the Kohinoor showing by Maharaj Singh Ji's possessions, the room was quite small. And I don't know if that was purposeful, but it was kind of that thing of, I don't know, maybe mentally or psychologically, how even during when we look at that period, how I think the Sikh Empire was quite, I don't think open-minded is the right word, but the way Maharaja Ranjit Singh Ji had that ability to bring other people in was something that fascinated me. And then it almost symbolically represented that closing in of the walls.
He actually wanted to show a lot more, but he was limited to a certain amount of pieces in that space. And just think, these objects connect to us to it's only 200 to 300 years ago. It's not that long a period at all. But these objects connect us to our roots the same way we started the conversation by our elders connecting us to those roots. They might have told us verbally, but what these objects tell us is, Jwan Singh ji, your brother-in-law was reading the writing on the chakkar, and on a chakkar it says things like "Jhoot nahi bolna." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, what kind of person has that on their personal shastra, or written on their personal shastra? What are they trying to remind themselves of? What are they adorning their bodies with that text? That text, they're basically adorning that. You know what I mean? And actually wearing that, and that was really cool.
The one thing that stuck out to me the most, or you felt in awe of it, was Hari Singh Nalua's tal. And even though the tal was gold plated, you could visibly see how it had been used in combat. It had those dents and it had those marks of that this has been used, and it almost like brought Hari Singh Nalwa to life. And I think that's it, really, isn't it? That I think what this is trying to do is bring something to life and to start that conversation of what actually was happening during that period, and not to kind of evangelize it or make it come across as some hero story, like actually practically what was going on and how is that relevant to us now. I think that's what makes it fascinating to me.
Davinder pointed out the style of the turban change in the UK. So the way that we're tying out the star now in the UK, you're kind of seeing less of the Nokdar, or the like Kenyan style pag, or the traditional India Patiala Shai, that sort of style of pag. And there's so many people now tying Siddhe Dastara, whether it's gold Dastara or whatnot. But what no one actually thinks what started that. There's a painting of Bhai Maharaj Singh there, and Bhai Maharaj Singh is an interesting character anyway, and I think Jawan Singh will definitely touch on him in this podcast. But the style of the star that he was wearing in that painting, which was of early 1800s, which was before Sadhguru Ram Singh Ji had ascended to the Gurgaddi, the style of the star that they tied was that of, you could now call it a Siddha Dastar, a Gurmukhi Dastar. So that link is there. Asa's laughing.
I remember asking John the question when I saw the chakkar. I was like, do you reckon these have seen some action? And I was like, yeah, they definitely have. So, that connection that you were talking about, that these artifacts take you back in history, and you wonder, how were these things living life, just day to day, and their lifestyle must have been so intense. And I think we've mentioned this on a previous podcast that like, if we look at Sadhguru Gobind Singh Ji's day-to-day routine, it would have been so like ram-packed, but so efficient. So being able to tie the star on a whim, get ready for action, it just sort of makes sense. And you quick time wrap it up and go. There's no time there to get a mirror out and wait, give me a second, let me sort this lot out. You know what I mean? Yeah. Just makes sense.
Should we do what we've been consuming?
Yeah, let's do what we've been consuming, because it sounds like you're ready for it. So, Jwan Singh Ji, what have you been consuming this week?
So, what I wanted to share was a book that Jaswinder Singh, historian, had written called The Kuka Movement. And really, it's not a lot of him writing, to be honest, but he's done an amazing project of collecting all of the different letters that had mentioned the movement of the Kuka Singhs, what they were doing in their day-to-day life, when they were imprisoned, how they were being treated in prison, and not from Punjab historian perspective, but from all of the different letters that were being sent by the East India Company from India to the UK. And literally reading it, it's like going into this time machine and seeing how they were communicating about certain things. I can't go into all of the different chapters, but one of the chapters near the end talks about somebody called Banarasi Das. And in all of the letters, it's mentioned that he is a fakir and a kuka. And this is not me saying this. This is written in the letters that are being written by the officials at that time, that Banarasi Das Kuka is the guru of Maharaja Dalip Singh. And they've given a whole extract and it was called the Political Extract of Punjab's Special Bureau. So essentially their research on all of the main figures at that time. And they've gone into so much detail about this Banarasi Das Kuka, where they've said he used to be a Khatri, he used to live in Lucknow, how old he is, who his brother is, how he ended up moving to Banaras, how much possessions he have, their guess on what his net worth is, the kind of people that he hangs out with, how he ended up coming to the UK he actually came physically to the UK, and he actually physically met Maharaja Dalip Singh, and they record his discourses that he's having, and it says here Sir Mackenzie Wallace is writing to somebody called H.M. Durand. He's saying, herewith copy of a letter regarding the activity of a man described as Maharaja Dalip Singh's guru, which has been forwarded to me by Bailey. And all of these, while he's in the UK, they are asking, we wish to ask for your permission to arrest this man. And it goes into all of these different details of all of his movements. So it's around 1885 to 1886, how he's ended up meeting Maharaja Dalip Singh, and how all of this actually relates back to the movements of Suba Gurcharan Singh Ji and his movements to Russia. And it's so interesting how it goes through this story between these different letters of his movements.
I've been watching and consuming Clarkson's Farm. The new season came.
Oh, it's
I don't know if you guys have had a chance to see it, but it's so good.
Yeah, it's
the way that he's bringing light to the fact that, you know, farming is such a struggling industry in the UK. Aside from crops, a lot of farming here is more grazeland, so it's more for like the meat industry and the dairy industry. But irrespective, farming is just a very, very difficult job because you're at the mercy of the elements. Too hot one month or too much rain one week, and the crop that you've invested thousands of pounds in is pretty much good for nothing, and that's a whole year's worth of work down the drain. Sometimes we fool ourselves or kid ourselves that I've laid these plans and things are going according to how I want them to go, but ultimately the ultimate orchestrator of everything is in control, and we sort of fool ourselves into this false sense of security that it's a result or something has happened because of my doing. But I've become a bit of a conspiracy theorist, so I still have this feeling that we're going to go to like atomic war, and we're going to get to a position where our food industry is just blitzed, right? And everybody has. I've been watching Fallout as well, actually. If you've not seen it on Amazon Prime, it's amazing. It's from the game, but they made a series out of it, and essentially it's how a post-apocalyptic society has to survive after a nuclear fallout.
You've gone full Sosaki,
and I've been thinking about this, like fend for ourselves, so not having to go to the shop to buy bread or flour, or to make prashada or like dal. Like, we don't have the farming capacity or the skills. Like, could we store grain? Do we know how to store grain? Like, if push came to shove, could we create wheat at home? Could we mill it? Or could we, could you survive without going to the supermarket for a week? Like, could you grow crop? Could you grow an onion or a potato at home? I don't think we have the farming skill to do it.
So today is Wednesday, the 22nd of May. And at the moment, it's about 8 o'clock. And the thing that I was consuming, the article came out today at 5:30. I've sent you both the article on WhatsApp. And the title is, and I'll read it out loud,
Oh, yeah,
Britons
I've seen this,
should
yeah.
have 3 days worth of tinned food and water, government says. Right?
Interesting.
I'm telling you, I feel like I'm becoming a conspiracy theorist, but it's going to happen.
But more than a conspiracy theorist, I think you are the Sikh of a guru. And the reason why I say that was because I was speaking to Mata Gyan Kaur's grandson, about 10 to 12 years ago about this same thing. And he said at the time, Sadhguru Pratap Singh Ji used to advise Sikh ke keep a store of an and dala. So dal, just for this reason that anything can happen. Have up to, I don't know how many days they said, but I think that that family used to keep at least 30 days, 30 to 45 days worth of dal and atta there, and pani supplies. And they used to just replenish that and then use that, replenish that and use. And the next part is we tasked each other to read a book called Bhavrasamrit. And the Bhavrasamrit Granth is essentially has been translated by a Nirmala Sant called Tirath Singh Nirmala.
So essentially, this is when we go back in that history. I'll take you back to the time of Guru Gobind Singh Ji, where Guru Gobind Singh Ji is in Hazur Sahib, and they are with a Sikh called Pandit Man Singh. And Pandit Man Singh, and this is where the Nirmala Sampradaya starts from. So at that time, the Sampradaya that we are aware of that originate from this time is one, the Nahang Sampradaya, and the other one is the Nirmala Sampradaya, the two Sampradaya that Sadhguru Gobind Singh Ji actually guides and actually initiates themselves. And many other offshoots come off this afterwards. However, just looking at that history, we have some names that come up in history, like Pandit Man Singh, Pandit Jait Singh, Baba Punjab Singh, Baba Dargah Singh, and many others that are sent to Kanshi. And with Guru Gobind Singh Ji's instructions to go learn from the scholars in Kanshi, to be able to gain the knowledge of a Vedant and Brahmgyan and Brahmvidya. So Sadhguruji, Guru Gobind Singh Ji were very forward thinking and had this Vishal Vichar of wanting to bless the Khalsa Panth and the Sikhs with these Granths. So those that don't know, but anybody that wasn't a Brahmin during this period, you wouldn't be able to access any of this knowledge. And this is something that Guru Gobind Singh Ji wanted to break up. So when we look at Banis like Chandi Diwar, Chandi Charitra Dusra, Ukat Bilas, these Baniya that are taken from the Markandeya Puran, and Guru Gobind Singh Ji writes it in with their own pen. We see Guru Gobind Singh Ji's aims here around wanting to bless the Khalsa Panth with these different pieces of knowledge. So this is where Tirath Singh Nirmala talks about these three types of Khalsa, and he positions it as you've got this Gristi Khalsa, you've got this Nirmal Khalsa, which he refers to connecting to the Nirmala Sampradaya, and you've got this Shastrtari, Shastra Yodhavir Khalsa, which he relates to the Nahang Sampradaya. And all of this ends up linking back to that Guru Gobind Singh Ji is giving this multifaceted idea of where they're trying to get things to go, essentially. So that's kind of a starting point and a bit of a background. So you have Pandit Man Singh Ji, who's very learned, and eventually he receives a student called Pandit Gulab Singh, who is the author of the Bhavrasamrit Granth. And Pandit Gulab Singh Ji, his life story is crazy, very interesting. His life story, and even Bhai Khan Singh Ji Nabha mentions them in the Mahan Kosh, and he even goes into the detail of when they were born in 1789. He talks about that they were Jimidar Sikh, and their Mataji's name was Gauri, and their Pitaji's name was Raya, and they were born in the Pind Sekhov. And they talk about that he goes to learn from Man Singh, and he learns in a lot of depth Punjabi, Sanskrit, Hindi, and he ends up writing this Granth in Braj Pasha, which was the old traditional language that was used to write this type of poetry and to write these types of Granths when they were written. And he talks so highly of Pandit Man Singh when we read what is mentioned by Khan Singh Ji in the Mahan Kosh. So it says here, for example, in the Bhavrasamrit, Pandit Gulab Singh Ji says, Man Singh Gur ke sada bando pad udar. So he talks about Man Singh being his guru. And also in the Prabodh Chandra Natak, he also mentions Man Singh Gur ko namo taran karunasar. So he had this respect for his guru, and later on Sarupaji would touch upon these concepts of what is a Vidya Guru, what is your guru, and who you learn from. Going from there, we see this lineage of where Pandit Gulab Singh Ji, by Pandit Man Singh Ji, who was the Hazuri Sikh of Guru Gobind Singh Ji, sends their student to Kanshi, that I was sent to Kanshi, now I'm going to send you to Kanshi. He is sent there and he does a seva, and the name of who he learns from there isn't mentioned in any of the texts that I've looked in. But whoever he goes to learn, he starts by doing seva. And all of the Pratan Granths that we read, and even in Gurbani, that there's this concept of going to do your Guru Dakshana, meaning the first thing, you wouldn't go and ask for what you want from your Guru, you would go and do seva. Your starting point would be seva, and only when your Guru was happy with your seva, then you would receive something. Whether that was knowledge, whether that was vidya, whatever monorath you would go with, whatever mindset or with whatever wishes you would go with. So from there he does seva, and eventually when his guru finds out that he is a Jimidar Sikh, and he says, I can't teach you, and all of the family are so happy with Pandit Man Singh seva, they say you can't send him empty-handed. Even they were impressed by his selfless service. So then his teacher said to him that this is what we can do, is I can't teach you because the whole society will go against me, because it's against what he thought of as his code of conduct for me to teach somebody other than a Brahmin or Kshatri. So then, and obviously looking down upon the Jimidar as of a lower caste. So he would sit outside of his teacher's classroom, and this is what his teacher said, that you can sit outside of the class, listen to whatever you want to listen to, and you can do with that as you wish, but I will not directly teach you. So what Pandit Man Singh Ji would do, he would sit there, listen to what was being taught, and then he would go back to where he was staying and he would write down what he had heard during that day. And for many years, this is how he gained his knowledge. And he comes then back to his guru, Pandit Man Singh, and he mentions all of what he has learnt, and he receives the khushiyan from Pandit Man Singh and says that it is your duty now to teach the rest of the students all of what you have learnt. So in aid of what he wanted to teach everybody, he writes over 40 granths. And from the ones that we have that are mentioned, before I touch upon that, but he writes around 40 granths. And when then we go from there, the local Brahmins get jealous of Pandit Man Singh. And they get jealous of Pandit Gulab Singh, sorry. And they go to Pandit Man Singh and say that we want to see all of these granths that Pandit Gulab Singh have written. And when they go to that, when they start reading all of those granths, through that jealousy of that he has more knowledge than us, they put all of those granths in the Saraswati river. And when Pandit Gulab Singh Ji hears upon this, at that point he stops writing anymore. And out of that, around 6 to 7 granths is what we have left, which include the Prabodh Chandra Natak, which includes the Bhavrasamrit, and many other granths. We have also, like, for example, the Mokh Panth Prakash. And this is where, and one of the first writings that we have, and looking at the dates of this, like Bhavrasamrit is said to be written in 1777. And when we look at that, we see Pandit Gulab Singh Ji also writing Karam Vipak Pakha, which is around 1753. So this is not long after the time that Guru Gobind Singh Ji is spending with their Sikh and Hazur Sahib. So this isn't a lot of time has passed since then. So this is kind of the history behind that. And I think, Sarupaji, when we was talking about this, you mentioned that, look, the 7 that we have is a lot of the basis of the Brahma Vidya Vedanta that we learn now. And imagine we had access to all 40. Even thinking about that is insane. So yeah, this is one of the early writers of that Nirmala tradition, and they eventually teach a lot of other students who go on to spread this, and then this ends up getting passed down to somebody called Sant Baba Sant Singh, and they are a Sikh of somebody called Mahant Hardit Singh. And Bhai Teerat Singh ji mentioned that then they end up a student of Sant Baba Sher Singh ji, who is a student of Sant Baba Sant Singh ji, and this is who Teerat Singh ji says, who I have gained my knowledge from, to give me the blessings and the knowledge to be able to do this translation, which is obviously what we've been looking at and reading. And also Kamalpreet Singh ji Pardesi have also done their version and their translation as well. But I think these are the two translations I'm aware of that we have that are in English. But there's also many other that are being written in Punjabi, because the original language is actually Braj Bhasha. And yeah, some people say that there's a strong influence here of a Parthari text, and this was called Virag Shaktam. And however, Bhai Teerat Singh ji notes some key differences, and one of the key differences is how Pandit Gulab Singh ji uses the Sargun Swarup as their point of worship. So across the whole text, the avatar that they are mentioning and in who they are in constant praise of is Ramchandra ji, Sri Ramchandra ji, and also mentioning Sri Krishna ji in some aspects around pleading for their salvation and for their well-being spiritually. But the key difference, and I think Bhai Teerat Singh ji makes a good point here, is he doesn't have a negative view of the human body, and he doesn't give a negative view of the human life. Whereas when we look at some of the old school text, especially Parthari, they looked at the human body as dirt. Like, this is via the human body where you commit sin. It's via this human body where you eat dirt. And it's via this human body that you eventually die. Whereas Pandit Gulab Singh ji's view on it is he takes more of a Bilahari Kudrat Vasya, that he takes this view of this beauty that you see within life.
So with your Vidya Guru and what Teerat Singh ji writes here, in the opening Mangalacharan, before even mentioning Guru Nanak Dev Ji, because as a Sikh, normally we would mention Guru Nanak Dev Ji first, and I don't think Pandit Gulab Singh Ji mentions Guru Nanak Dev Ji in the beginning of the text. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Jawan Singh Ji, but I think they mention their Vidya Guru first, and it says Man Singh Gur, and that they reference their Vidya Guru, that person that they've got understanding from, first before they mention any of their spiritual gurus who they may or may not have met. And I think if I'm drawing a comparison to how we treat learning in the West, and even the schooling system in India now, Eastern schooling system is very similar. I think it's very different. The life skills that we're learning from school is very syllabusized. So essentially, I'm making up words here again, but there's a syllabus to how things are taught. So you'll go into reception, they'll teach you ABC, they'll teach you 1, 2, 3. You're going to year 1, year 2, you'd learn your adding, your subtraction, you learn your division and all of that. And then you go all the way up to year 13 where you're in sixth form, and you've chosen your A levels and you've chosen a path, and then you go into university, and it's very linear. And every kid, 99% of the kids who go through that system, that schooling system, come out with very similar thought processes. And I'm not very versed on the Eastern schooling system as such, but I've been lucky to have been exposed to the Gur Shishya Parampara. So I was learning tabla from Pandit Sanju Sai since I was very young, and learning through a system that's not been made a syllabus. Learning at the beginning where you're not actually asking questions. Now think about you in year 2 not understanding why 2 + 2 = 4, and there's no one there to say 2 2, 4. How would you? I'm not saying that my Guruji was like that, but I'm saying that some things that we learnt in tabla, they weren't necessarily taught to us with the full text background of it. They weren't taught to us with, this is why we're going to play it like this, or this is how this works out. It was always done with, and this is just going to be crazy circles because this is done with ras and pav. So it's done with, okay, we're going to approach this like this because this is the sound it's going to create, or this is how it's created. Whereas I started to do a GCSE in music and changed very quickly because it was too rigid for me. But essentially, you would have to play a set composition in music. Whereas in our music, the way that I had learned it, music was always an expression. Okay, fine, fair enough. You've got your set qaidas and paltas, which don't necessarily change, but how you approach the note or how you approach the context or how you approach the matter can change. It's like you can say dhada tete dada tinna, or you can say dhada tete dhada tinna, and have that extra emphasis on certain areas of it. And that didn't work for me in the Western system. And this is what I wanted to touch upon with Vidya and Vidya Guru. Firstly, the respect for your teacher, because we all went to school here. When I went to school, I probably didn't listen as much as I needed to. And I think when you're learning from a Vidya Guru, now both of you guys are both students of Sant Nishan Singh Ji, and I mean, Asad's already mentioned them once today. And if you don't listen to the examples that they're giving, and you're not understand or not contemplating on those examples that they're giving, so there's kind of no way for you to actually live upon that. Whereas if you go to school and you're in science, for example, and you're learning about biology, and you can turn around and walk out of that class because everything's written down in a book, and you just need to learn as much as is in that book to then regurgitate and put all of that on your exam paper, and you'll pass. But your Vidya Guru, and if you're learning life skills and you're learning like these texts and philosophy and something that's not necessarily tangible, but it is complex in the mind, like you said, that Pandit Gulab Singh Ji said, your Vidya Guru and their experience is just as important as your experience. Because with them telling you, they will never be able to. It's not like a USB stick. You can't stick a USB stick in Sant Nishan Singh Ji's head and download it into your brain. It's not possible. It's not linear like that. You have to sit there, contemplate, and come to your own conclusion.
I think there's a dance that happens there between the student and the guru, of you receiving it. Obviously there is elements there of, I think Bhavrasamrit Singh Ji also mentioned this, is Panda Pao Amrit Tatal. What is your vessel at that moment in time? Like, are you open to the knowledge, or are you going to receive that knowledge and then just twist it and make it to what you want it to be? And then that also sometimes becomes an issue. That you just make things as so you become happy with it. Because actually knowledge, or pure knowledge, shouldn't be something that always you agree with. It should be things that actually challenge you.
In a Sikh family, when you're brought up and the answer to everything is ke sach by the hukam ya, ke oh Sadhguru ji da hukam ha, ke our hukam ha, how do you then break out of that, okay, this is hukam, I just need to do it, this is hukam, I just need to do it, or bring that contemplation in and say, maybe I need to think about something.
There was a Sikh during Guru Arjan Dev Ji's time. Most of the people in his pind had become Sikh, and he was the only one that was left that hadn't become a Sikh yet. And he goes humbly asking Guru Arjan Dev Pasha Ji, is, why has everybody become a Sikh? Everybody was happy before. What went wrong that everybody had to start doing all of this, waking up early in the morning, reading Gurbani? Like, I want to see it with my own eyes, with my body. That what is the benefit of doing all of this stuff? And Sadhguru Ji at that moment didn't say, go away, hukum manni da hunda. So the Sagurji at that point said, Sagurji Kirpa Karan, that they bless you with knowledge. And that's where what the meaning of Vivek is going out of your mind of doubt and going into a place of wisdom. So I think we should be open to questions, but and I think Nishan Singh mentioned this to me and Asap Baji once, is that in Sikhi there's no such thing as questions. They said that it's quite funny, we always call it Q&A sessions. That doesn't make sense in Gurmat. Nowhere in Gurbani has it mentioned anything around question and answer sessions. He says in Sikhi, the only thing that exists is Shanka di Nivritti, meaning to remove your doubts. That's the only thing that exists within Sikhi. There's no such thing as question and answer. Obviously, just to let you know, when you look through the translation, because this is also kind of a review of the Bhavrasamrit, who are we to even review it? It's more of a contemplation on it. But by Dheeraj Singh Ji, when they split, and I think this is beautiful that they've done this actually, because if you went straight into the translations, I think you would actually lose people. But he splits it into these key kind of sections. And obviously the first one was Vidya Guru and the importance of the Vidya Guru, which Sarabhaji you've covered. But there was also an element around Bhakti.
Bhakti's been a really interesting one. And again, like you say, it's in no way a review of the book, even though the book is incredible. But it's been a really nice reflective process. And some of the things that we've spoken about already in the introduction. So things like, how do you keep your focus? How do you, even if you've not woken up in the morning to do Naam Simran, how do you still keep Simran a constant theme throughout the day, and all these things. Pandit Gulab Singh Ji and the Bhakti chapter starts, sustained contemplative devotion. The choice of those three words is incredible. So sustained, like being able to do something swa, so with every breath, contemplative devotion, not subconsciously in the back of your mind. Oh, and I remember like when I was learning Punjabi school at Surad Gurdwara, one of my Punjabi teachers said to me, and I was maybe only 11 at the time, he goes, if a Sikh forgets their guru for 15 minutes, he's not a Sikh. I was like, whoa, is that a thing? Like that really took me back. It's like, shit, man, I've got to,
if it's 13 minutes, is that okay?
Is that okay? Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? So, it brought to light, I need to be remembering my guru more than I am. So, sustained contemplative devotion, and that third word of devotion, I think that's probably the closest you can get to Bhakti as like a one-to-one translation. But I think, going through what they've written in the chapter more, I feel like Bhakti is more ashki and more love than devotion. And maybe those two things are synonyms of each other, but we'll go through it and then maybe let's see what you guys think. So Panditji says, to recite Naam of your beloved and through Shabad is the way that, one of the ways to achieve liberation or moksha. And they describe how Guru Ram Das Ji has given examples that Naam has spanned across time through Raja Janak's time, Prahlad's time, Sukhdev's time, and all of these peoples became Gurmukhs through Naam. And a lot of these like words that are being used here, like as a Gurmukh, we would only relate somebody who's a Singh or like somebody who's part of the Khalsa as being somebody that's Gurmukh. Concept of becoming a Gurmukh and how these people were Gurmukhs, because like you said, Sarab, what is a Gurmukh? A Gurmukh is somebody who's not a Manmukh. A Manmukh is somebody who's listening to their own thoughts. But a Gurmukh is somebody who's listening to their Guru, like doing as the Guru has told you to do. And I love this analogy of like you being a tabla player and being told by your Guru what to play on your tabla, because fine, you could be a manmukh, you could do what you want to do and play what you want to play, but ultimately, if that's not pleasing to your Guru, then what's the point? One, you've invested financially in that tabla lesson, and then two, you've taken time out of your week to do it. And if you're just going there to play what you want to play, then you might as well not have gone. So the concept of being a Gurmukh. So Panditji then gives a formula as to how you become a Bhagat. And there's a couple of things that they write. The first thing is that you need to be able to hear the praise of the divine. right? Being able to hear somebody's sifta, right? And we in life we're so attuned to hearing people's buraiya that sometimes it's hard to hear somebody's praise at the same time. So that's number one to becoming a bhagat. Then being able to sing and appreciate the praise of the divine. So appreciation is such an abstract concept to some people, and well, just an abstract concept because who are you thanking? Like when somebody opens the door for you to get inside, it's easy. Like you know who's helping you. But to realize the underlying foundation of how society works, and recognizing that why do people help people? It's through compassion. Where does compassion come from? And there's like this underlying framework that society is built on. So being able to appreciate where my food comes from, or who's put the effort into do it. So that's number two. The next one is service. Again, through Sadhguru Nanak Dev Ji's Kirpa, we've got this concept of doing seva and serving the needy. And I remember Satnam Singh Ji saying, Nangenu kapda, bhukhenu prashada. Right? These are the two things that we can, we always have the opportunity to do these two things. So service. Then the next one was worship. And we spoke earlier about, wearing a dastar. But worship, like who are you worshipping? Who is your murshid? Who is the one that you love? I'm crazy because my murshid, my beloved, my husband, Lord, is the Almighty. Rach rach tako karo singar. I decorate myself, so I tie my dastar. Who for? For the one that I love. For him. It's not for society. So Panditji then goes on to say submission. Being able to submit yourself emotionally, feeling like a servant. How incredible is that? There's a Sakhi of Bhai Manji who an incredible personality, but when they are called to Sadhguru Arjan Dev Ji's Darbar after receiving Naam, one of the Gurbani talks that Gyani Maskeen Ji relates to Bhai Manji is, so now that I've come to my beloved, exhausted, I've tried every other avenue. Ab hum chali Thakur Pehar. I've gone to my beloved, exhausted. Jab hum saran Prabhu ki ai, rakh Prabhu pave maar. That now that I've come seeking your sanctuary, please either save me or destroy me. I no longer want Asa to exist. I want you to kill my ego. I don't want this vision of Asa to exist. All I want is to become one with you. To be at that level where tu karta, tu hua, mujh mein raha na hu. We all go through this roller coaster of happiness and sadness, but where does it actually come from? And Panditji writes, Sukh dukh teri agya pyare, duji nahi jaye. And that word there, pyare, Sukh dukh teri agya pyare, ki peace or happiness and suffering are through your will, my beloved. Hey mere pyare, the pain and pleasure come through your will. They don't come from anybody else. By using that word pyare as well, you are my beloved. Everything is in your control. Whether I perceive this situation in life as painful or as pleasureful, it's besides the point. I've labeled it something. I've given it an emotional attachment. But regardless of my labeling, it's still your will. And then Panditji goes on to saying, you need to cultivate an emotional bond or a friendship with your murshid. And how do you do that? How do you cultivate an emotional bond with something that you've never experienced? And it goes back to what you were saying, Sarab. Having a guru makes this process, in my opinion, a lot more simpler. Imagine your guru in your mind so that you can recite his name through using your tongue, right? Netri Satguru Pekhana, Sravani Sunana Gurunao. Then using your eyes, observe him, see how he behaves, see how he conducts himself, or how they conduct themselves in this world. Netri Satguru Pekhana, Sravani Sunana Gurunao. And whilst you're observing him, listen to the Naam with your ears. Being able to recite Naam loud enough so that you can hear it for yourself, right? Sadgur se tiratya dargah paiye thao. The union with him, with your beloved, with the one that with the Almighty will come through love and appreciation. If you are my beloved, if you are my friend, then never leave me. And what does that mean? You know, to be never be left by your beloved. How do we bring people to life? Is through their remembrance. Like Bibiji, they've passed away, but through our simran of them, through our thought of them, we've brought them back to life and how they used to be. You know, that memory is still fresh today of how they used to care for the Sangat, how they used to do Simran and Seva. The concept of Sarbatta Pala, you know, wishing good for others, was a key point that they made. Doing good for others, so, you know, encompassing Seva, but being compassionate, you know, being able to put yourself in other people's shoes, being charitable and remaining cheerful. All of these things, Panditji says, are how we can cultivate devotion or bhakti.
Bhakti is a practice, and it's something you practice, or is something that you experience, or something that you're striving for. However, within the Bhavrasamrit, there's also this element of the things that you're battling against, and actually acknowledging what your enemies are, and who is actually going to be able to guide you, or what is going to be to your ultimate benefit. And that element they put into two, which is niyam and yam. And this is the external versus the internal. And he mentions how this is related to the Ashtanga yoga practice. But to bring this to life a little bit, because I think that on its own, I don't think we'll be able to relate to that much. But he talks about yam, and what I want to relate this to, because is around the Triguna Maya nature of existence. And Triguna Maya is when we talk about Rajoguna, Tamoguna, and Satoguna. So when we say Satoguna is the element of the truthful nature, Rajoguna is the nature of a person that they want to gain things, they want to do Raj, they want to have ownership over things. And Tamoguna is the destructive nature of the person. Now this relates to the internal and external fight that the Jigyasu has. And the first one, when we look at it, is when he talks about yam, is around this being able to sustain ethical behavior. So what I guess we would call rahat. And he puts this into that the five ang of this, which he mentions, is one is himsa, which is non-violence. The next one is satya, which is truthfulness. And then the next one is the knowledge of asatya, and how asatya really him is translated to not stealing or not taking others' possessions. Then being a brahmachari, which is in this sense somebody that yearns for knowledge. And then apragya, and apragya is being non-conventious, meaning not being self-centered. And then he goes on to talk about what yam means. So when you have knowledge of these five things, this is what is going to have an impact on your external behavior, how you are perceived. And then he talks about these internal mindsets that are needed in terms of being a jigyasu. And he splits these up. So he talks about soch, meaning cleanliness, santosh, meaning contentment, or being happy with what you have, tap, which we know, we hear this all the time, jat pahara tiraj sunyar ehran madved hathiyar. And we hear Nrairas jap tap sanjam tarmana kamaya seva sadhana janya har raya. Tap, even though when we hear that word we think of heat, but it's more around your spiritual practice and your dridata in that practice, or your austerity within that practice. The next one is around your study, so your vichar essentially. Being able to give time to your study. And then the last one, which I think it relates beautifully, pranidhana, which is Ishwar pranidhana, which meaning your surrender in front of God. And then after he talks about these things, he says that out of all of these things, of the knowledge of the internal and external battle that you have, and this comes in Guru Gobind Singh Ji's Bani as well, of the fight between Vivek and Abhivek, and the dals and the armies of the Vivek and Abhivek. And And then he goes on to talking about how that these elements that he's trying to essentially talk to us about, or what Pandit Gulab Singh is trying to explain to us, is just to have control over these 5 things. And he kind of condenses it down. So he says, what are you trying to control when it comes to this body? When it comes to Vishya, which is like when it comes to the negative forces, and these indriya that we have, which is our sense organs, and those are split into sabad, which is sound, sparsh, which is touch, Roop, which is a form or being able to see something visibly, Ras, meaning something to taste, and Gandh, which is essentially what you can smell. And all of these being these different things that we need to have under our control. And something that was quite funny is when he talks about control, that he says that Pandit Gulab Singh Ji, going back to Guru Nanak Dev Ji's philosophy, he, in a funny way, goes back to the concept of pranayam, and he says, I do not agree with this concept. And he doesn't say to practice this at all. And he says, I do not understand the practice of somebody saying, just control your breath and then you'll be able to control yourself. And he says that lacking vivek, meaning lacking the true knowledge, one as well may be mistaken by doing their breathing practices and then becoming lightheaded, and then thinking that this lightheadedness is a form of my spiritual progression, which was quite funny. And he also, in another section, relates this to how Bhima is saying to Bhishma is saying to Yudhishthir that if you wanted to not take any action, you might as well be dead. You need to have action. You need to perform your duty. So he takes quite a direct approach when it comes to to try and get his point across, of that this is going to take some effort. This isn't just going to be you're going to sit there and do this breathing practice and you're going to get somewhere. It's meaning that there's this ultimate understanding that you need, which he calls vivek. And then he goes on to say, okay, what is the thing that you need? And he says one is withdrawing yourself from the sensory pleasures, and then essentially meditating upon the concentration on your or the prarthana, as you were saying, Asapaji, on your master, or on the one, or on Akal. And then how do you get to that point? And then he goes to a whole section talking about dhyan, which is what is the meaning of focus. And what I wanted to relate this to, I think, is when I was reading it, is when we read the other pieces of work that Pandit Gulab Singh is writing. So he does the writing of Mokh Panth Prakash and Adhyatam Ramayana, and essentially these are the fulfillments of Guru Gobind Singh Ji's directions, of Guru Gobind Singh Ji wanting this knowledge to be accessible to the Sikhs. And Pandit Gulab Singh Ji, I think, taking this of Guru Gobind Singh Ji's instructions, wanted to simplify this, because actually when we read this like in terms of the original text, the way Pandit Gulab Singh Ji has split this up and actually made it very clear of this internal and external battle, I don't think actually we would be able to come to that conclusion on our own without them actually simplifying it. So I think they saw this as a form of bhakti to Guru Gobind Singh Ji, of them being able to fulfill their guru's wishes, and you can see that through the bhakti and through the devotion and focus of how they split this up into those different key kind of sections.
The other thing on that is, right, so once you do start contemplating, like I think Asa Singh said earlier, where you're talking about you're waking up, even if you're waking up at not Amrit Vela time and the sun's already up, but you still sit down to read Japji Sahib. Now, I guarantee you, after a month, 2 months or something, of you reading every day Amrit Vela Sachana Vadiyai Vichar,
it's going to happen.
Will automatically
yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%. It has to happen. But we have to start at that point. So yeah, I think that's why this chapter was so profound. I think, and and what Pandit Gulab Singh Ji was trying to do. And I think when we think about it, if I wanted to conclude it, and what I think, obviously I can't meet Pandit Gulab Singh Ji right now, but if I was thinking from their vichar, what they were trying to get at is, when they're saying Pav, is what is the meaning of it, and what is the nectar that comes out of that meaning. And when you have that in this one singular form of devotion, whether that is in the form of Sargun Avatar worship, where they mention Sri Ramchandra Ji, or whether that is otherwise, or in terms of whatever your Ishtadev is, but actually knowing what is your Isht. Because if you don't have that actually very clear within your mind, you're bound to get confused. It needs to be very clear. I think that's why Gurwani starts from 1. Is to remove you from that confusion. And I think Indrajit Singh Ji says this very beautifully, is this isn't the what is versus Dehtari versus somebody that believes in the Guru Granth Sahib as their guru. It goes beyond that. And it goes beyond these things, I think. And I think that is the beauty of it, is when we go beyond that, then everything becomes yours. We can talk about it. We get this bliss of actually talking about that mindset. But imagine actually being there.
I think we don't have time to put it in this episode, so we're going to have to spend another episode and do that. But I have one question for you guys.
Anji.
What are your fun facts for this week? And I'm going to start with Asa Singh.
Do you have a pile of books, Sarab, that are just sitting on the floor and it's just a pile?
They're not on the floor, but they are on my table.
Yeah, so you have a pile of books that you haven't been able to read through yet.
Yep.
There's a Japanese word to describe that, and it's sanduku.
Oh, man. If it was sanduki, I thought it was like sanduk, where you've just put it in the treasure chest and that's it, it's gone.
It's sanduku. The Japanese have a word for
they have
everything. It feels
it's
like.
cool, isn't it? My one was that, did you know that in 2007 in France, there was a 44-year-old man who went to the doctor complaining of numbness in his leg, and he underwent a CT scan, and they found out that he didn't have 90% of his brain.
What?
So 90% of his brain was
he's
missing.
Smiling in that X-ray. Are you sure that's real, Joanne?
I know, I said.
He's
Whoa,
smiling.
actually,
Look
wait.
at that
Looks
X-ray.
like
He's
that Homer
smiling.
Simpson. That looks like that Homer Simpson scan, if you've ever seen that meme.
Well, let me Google this one. Imagine. True, it's true. It's true. I'll send you the article.
So, you know when you're on X or Twitter and you want to write a hashtag,
Yeah.
the character for the hashtag, what is the actual name of that?
I thought it was called a hashtag.
I thought it was hashtag as well.
It's called an octothorpe. It's an octothorpe because it's got 8 points. Draw it out. I'm drawing it out right now.
Good, very knowledgeable fact.
You know what I got told that they really enjoy Asapaji's jokes at the end of the episode.
They're not jokes. They're genuine facts. They're not
Genuine facts.
Chalo yaar. Sat Sri Akal.
What?
You just have to light a skunk's bum, and it's there. You've got a fire-breathing skunk.
You know what the weird thing is? So you wrote in that text message, birds don't fart, but spiders do. But when I first had when I looked at that, I read birds don't fart, but I do. I don't know. That's so random.